Just when you thought the party was getting started, we are almost to the last of the keynotes. And there's a reason why we have Curtis Preston, one of the best speakers in the industry. He's got always an opinion on what's happening. So please welcome Curtis Preston.
So, wait. Oh, there we go.
To restore, rah, rah, Roma, Roma, ma, ga, ga, ooh la la. Why can't you restore? I want my sequel, I want my spreadsheets. I want my everything that belongs to me. I want my files. Files, 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 I want my files.
So Lady Gaga's a fan. What can I say? So, how y'all doing? Doing all right? Hopefully this is the version of the presentation that I prepared for. So, what are we going to talk about? Talk about cloudy stuff. So things are getting cloudy. Here's just an agenda. We'll talk about something I'm calling what a difference the cloud makes. Why the public cloud? Why is it? And then one of the topics that I talk about is whether or not do private clouds exist. Well, then we're going to talk about backup in the cloud, certainly near and dear to my heart. And we'll talk about the cloud and open source, and then what keeps me awake at night. So for those of you that aren't familiar with me, so I've been in the industry for about 18 years. And about 8 years ago, I started a company called the Storage Group. And it was a consulting company. And, we did traditional backup and recovery consulting. And we had the same IT needs that every other company, had, right? And, we needed a file server, a mail server, a phone system, all these sort of things. And so I did what every other company did back in 2003. I bought stuff, right? So, I needed a file server, a mail server, and a backup system. We actually found this company called Net Integrator that sold an integrated system that did all that. A phone system was something called TeleVantage, which I was pretty excited about 8 years ago because it was a Windows-based phone system that was about a fifth of the cost of what we called a traditional PBX back then, and I was very excited about that. That excitement waned rather quickly. I'll explain that in a minute. We needed a CRM system, and so we bought ACT. How many of you have ever used ACT? Okay. We, of course, we needed a web server, so we had a Linux server. And we used QuickBooks. We used Excel for our commission system to calculate the commissions for our sales reps. And we also needed project management. And because I do suffer from what I call CRS, which is can't remember stuff. Managing the only thing more fun than working for me is managing me. So what we got. Okay, so we spent thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars for infrastructure to get our company functioning, just to do the basic things that we needed to do as a company. So this Windows-based phone system that I was so very much excited to purchase, I can tell you that after a year or so, I immediately began to be terrified of it, right? Because Windows, there is this little thing called patches. I mean, let's face it, every OS there's patches. But Windows, there's patches every Tuesday or something, right? And I was scared to death to ever patch the thing. Why? Because this was our phone system. It was the lifeblood. Between if you shut off my phone and shut off my email, I don't know what I'm going to do, right? So I was absolutely terrified to patch this thing. And then what happened? A new version of Windows came out, and we were being pushed towards this new version of Windows. And, from a support perspective, but I was faced with this concept of replacing the underlying version of Windows underneath this wonderful phone system that I, love so much. And I was just absolutely terrified, so terrified that I never did it. I literally never upgraded to whatever version of Windows. And then we bought this VoIP card. I was very excited back in 2000-something. I was going to do VoIP, right? That was the thing. and this idea of being on site at a customer and being able to take phone calls at my PC. I was very excited about that. So I spent $2,000. I remember it was $2,000, like $19.99, I'm guessing. And I bought a VoIP card, right? That was designed, it was an Intel ProLogic card, right? Props to Intel somewhere out there. Anyway, and never installed it. Because why? Because I was scared to death to touch the phone system, okay? We had a mail server that, although I was very big on the fact that it was Linux-based, I was very excited that it was an open source system. It never quite completely worked with our mail client, right? Never quite did that. We also had systems that didn't interface with each other. But the thing is, we stuck with these systems. Why? Because it's what we paid for, right? So fast forward to 2011. I started another company last year, and a company called Truth in IT, which is a publishing and media company, which is very different than the consulting business. And we had all the same needs, but here's what happened. So we just licensed things, right? Everything from Dropbox to Salesforce to Virtual PBX, which is one of many virtual phone systems out there, right? And for those of you that are Dropbox haters, right? I know it's got security issues, but at least it works. That is certainly a feature that, and basically, I'm not too concerned about the data that we put on there. It's not highly, security-sensitive data. But that's what I've done, is I've replaced every single piece of infrastructure that I would have bought last year. I basically, instead of buying a piece of infrastructure, I bought a service. And what I'm saying is that if you go back about 2 years, I remember hearing about the cloud. Cloud this, cloud that, cloud that. And I literally was on that group of people that said that this is just a fad, right? I don't know what this cloud said. It's just another word for utility computing, right? And then fast forward to last year, this is exactly how I deployed my entire infrastructure. The funny thing is, other than our laptops, the only piece of IT infrastructure that we have is, oddly enough, a virtual machine, right? And the only purpose that piece of equipment serves is to run a piece of software that I did have to pay $30 for to synchronize between two of my cloud providers, right? Because they didn't know how to do it. And things are very, very different. I definitely want to talk to you about what life is like running a company entirely in the cloud. So here's another thing that I found out. You need Windows to see the clouds. And that was a tough reality for me because we are a Mac shop, right? We're a Mac shop and a Linux shop. And a few years ago, I basically I'm not a fanboy or anything, but I just got tired of rebuilding my Windows PC every 9 months, right? And so I went to Mac OS. But what I found was in deploying these solutions in the cloud that many of them just assumed that you were running Windows. That was one thing that I did experience that I found rather frustrating. And especially since we did buy Office 2011, Office 2011 for the Mac, right? And one of the big things that came with that was Outlook. Because before that, for those of you, how many Mackie people do we have out there? Just curious. Okay, so, there was Entourage, right? Which I called not Outlook, okay? Some of you actually liked Entourage. I know that there's people that miss Entourage. I didn't, okay? But one of the things that I found was that these cloud companies assume that, they have oh, yes, we interface with Outlook. Here's our .exe file that you can download and install, and everything will be awesome. Or they'll say, yes, we interface with Outlook. Just synchronize your Outlook to this iCalendar feed. And I'm like, yeah, Outlook on the Mac doesn't work with iCalendar feeds. What? I'm so surprised. That happened over and over and over. So if you are, I don't quite know what the makeup is of this audience. Many of you are from companies that actually design cloud solutions. And if you are, I'm just throwing out there that using an open standard does help, such as iCalendar is a perfect example. But it can help a lot of platforms, but it does sometimes leave some platforms out on the cold. And don't just assume that because something works one way on one platform, don't assume that it works another way on another platform. So I have probably the broadest definition of what is the cloud, right? Which for me, it's just services that you don't manage. How many of you watch or have watched 2.5 Men? Okay, do you remember the episode when, what's his name? Alan wanted a satellite dish. You guys remember this episode? And if you didn't remember the episode, what he kept doing was the whole episode, the story arc, that episode, that he was buying the satellite dish and he was going to take it and put it up on the roof. Okay? And what Charlie kept saying was, and Alan was going to do this himself, what Charlie kept saying is, why don't you just call the guy? Right? And what happened was Alan went up on the roof, and he basically ended up falling and breaking his neck or whatever. And, of course, Charlie's response was, why don't you just call the guy? Well, for me, that's what the cloud is, right? It's a yearly or a monthly bill that just changes with usage. And you just basically say how much you want, and magic happens. So we still use Exchange, but we have Exchange in the cloud. We have hosted Exchange. And so we have about 5 employees now. If I was to, hire 10 times more people, and I'd have 45 more Exchange mailboxes, I would just have to go and point and click, and magic would happen. And if I kept it growing, and I kept growing, and I got so big that I was the biggest guy on that Exchange server, and they needed to move me, it would just happen, right? I wouldn't need to worry about it, right? That's for me the idea of the public cloud. It is almost exclusively done on virtualized infrastructure, right? These servers are almost entirely virtual in some sense. The beauty thing is that provisioning and management is somebody else's problem. So why the cloud, right? Here's the thing, and I may get some arrows pointed at me. It's not necessarily cheaper, okay? It's just more flexible, and it's about having a predictable, again, monthly or annual cost, and not having to do that capital outlay, right? So I bought systems that were $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 when I started the company 8 years ago. I haven't bought a single, I bought one server that is running VMware for us to test stuff, right? That's our only actual server. And I didn't have to buy all that stuff. Now, oddly enough, my experience has been interesting. Not all cloud companies are the same from a pricing perspective. Some of them, click here, put your credit card there, and then we'll bill you every month. Does that sound about right? S3, for example, right? We'll just bill you every month for your usage, okay? And then there's Salesforce. How many of you ever bought Salesforce or licensed Salesforce? Okay. So if your experience was like mine, it's, sign here for your, if you want to have it's like the first one's like $30 or $40 a month, something like that. And I'm ready to put in my credit card. And they're like, no. You need to sign a thing, and you need to give us a year's worth of services up front. And then I'm like, okay, that's great. So that's for the standard, great. And then it was about 2 weeks later, hey, I need this piece of functionality, which I saw advertised on your. Oh, well, that's in the whatever's beyond standard, the business plus thing. And, well, how much is that? Well, it's only $50 more a month. So please give us another $600 for a year's worth of service. And then about a month later, I needed another piece of functionality. About 3 months later, I had given Salesforce several $1,000s, and I'm now an enterprise customer with one license. So I'm just saying, not all cloud companies are very monthly, whatever you want to call it. But this is the thing that I see. When I think about the cloud and what we can do with the cloud, I think about companies like Zynga, and I think about companies like Netflix, right? So how many of you know who Zynga is? Yes? How many of you are addicted to Zynga? Some Zynga product. Anyone going to raise their hand? All right. What is it? For your wife. You want to join a group, husbands of addicted Zynga users? Yes. For a while, it was Farmville, right? And the thing with Farmville was you got to plant the crops, and then once you plant the crops, you got to come back and you got to harvest the crops, and then you got to plow the field, and you got to get your friends to plow the field. And then my wife wants the usernames and passwords of all of the Facebook people in the house, so that when they're not there, that she can log in and plow her fields as my daughter, right? Because she can do, right? And then she went I might be, is this publicized? This might be against the terms of service. She might have, I'm just saying, she might have fake Facebook IDs that she uses to log in and do things for herself as her friend. Anyway, but there's this new thing. I don't know what it is. There's this new thing that she totally just dumped Facebook. I mean, Farmville like that, and she's on this new thing that actually does look a lot of fun. What's this got to do with the cloud? Well, the thing is, Zynga is run in the cloud, right? They do have a mixture of private and public, but when they come out with a new product, they need like 5,000 new servers tomorrow, right? Well, they just call the guy, and boom, they've got 5,000 new servers. And maybe that product takes off, and they need 10,000 servers, and so they just call the guy. Maybe that product doesn't take off, and they need those 5,000 servers to go away. That's the beauty of the cloud, right? Is that they can just, if the product is taken off, they can take those 5,000, maybe make it 10,000, maybe bring some of them in-house, maybe bring some of them, out of the, I almost said outhouse, but that would be weird. And they can do that. It's just about flexibility, right? That is what I think about. And then again with Netflix, for those of you that are, I'm a big Netflix online. Actually, at this point, I watch way more Netflix online than I watch actual DVDs, partly because my daughters are really good at hiding them. But I'm all about the online. And I got interested in Doctor Who for the first time, and next thing I know, I've watched like every episode ever, thanks to Netflix Online. And their stuff is almost entirely run on Amazon infrastructure, right? I just realized I have absolutely no timekeeping device up here. You'll just tell me, you just kick me off, and it's, what do I got? Am I almost done? No, I just started. Okay. All right, I'll just put this up here. All right. So here's another thing that I get in trouble a lot sometimes. There is a lot of what we call cloud washing going on, right? Everybody wants to say that their product is cloud enabled, right? And if it's not really cloud enabled, then they say it enables the private cloud, right? And I'm like, okay, my eyes roll so far back, I look like a zombie, right? And the thing is that it's not, the private cloud is, IT, okay, in one sense, right? That's what's happened. The term private cloud has become so general that the IT, we've called anything that is IT the private cloud, right? And so here's the thing, and this reminds me a little bit of, Jeff Foxworthy's You Might Be a Redneck, right? So, if most of your resources are virtualized, and you can dynamically create VMs or storage, you might be a private cloud, okay? If your business units can either make a call or just click on a button and then magically they have the new server or the extra capacity that they might need, they don't have to go out and you don't have to buy new infrastructure attached to their project. It just magically appears when they need it. Then you might have a private cloud. If your business units can dynamically increase and decrease. That's a real key here, right? If they can go and do like I described Zynga does, if they can do that, then you might actually have a private cloud. And then finally, if you have chargeback, to me, that is the true key of having a private cloud. I'm a fan of chargeback, have always been a fan of chargeback, right? And I realize that very few of you, for those, again, I don't know what the makeup is, how many of you here sell stuff and how many of you here buy stuff, but very few companies, from my perspective, or from my experience, are doing chargeback. So a higher percentage are doing what we call, shame back, right? The reporting and saying, here's the nasty users of all of the different storage. But if you do, my opinion is that doing chargeback, just outside of cloud for a minute, doing chargeback is the absolutely only way to influence human behavior, right? It's the only way to do it. That if a business will, so here's the conversation. So I do backups, right? So you're a business unit, and I come to you and I say, what RTO and RPO do you want, right? How fast do you want your data restored? And how much data do you want to lose? What are your answers going to be? 5 minutes. I want my data restored in 5 minutes. And I don't want to lose any data. Right? Is that not what every business unit is going to answer? Okay. So my answer. So I was in consulting. I'm so glad to not be doing that anymore. But I was in consulting for a long time. And I did a lot of training of consultants. And one of the things that you train a consultant to never say, ever, is the word no. Right? Can you do this? No, that's not what I do. That you don't do that. Right? But it's not in the scope of the project. I know, consultant, this is not how we answer. The answer is, hey, consultant, can you sweep the floor? The answer is, I'd be happy to add that to the scope of the project and the cost of the invoice. Right? My favorite thing I ever got paid for a large internet retailer was I was once paid my full bill rate, which was $2K a day, to label tapes for 2 whole days. Okay? So they paid $4,000 to have me sit there and put labels on tapes. So you know what they got at the end of the 2 days and the $4,000 invoice? You know what they got? The following piece of advice. They sell tapes with labels already on them. I'm just saying. Here's your invoice. So what is it? Oh, my point is, so I go back to you and I say, your RTO is 5 minutes and your RPO is 0. Great. I'll be happy to do that. That would be $1 million. Right? And you're like, wait, it's not, I don't have $1 million. Okay, what exactly can you afford to pay for and justify with your business, blah, blah, blah. That's my point is, without chargeback, there's no way to influence human behavior. They will store as much crap on your servers as possible, and they will request the most ridiculous things from an RTO, IPO perspective. All right, so let's talk about the public cloud for backups. So I am a huge fan of the public cloud for backups. If you are a personal user of IT stuff at home and you have no other cloud product other than Netflix, okay, this is the one you should have, right? I'm a huge fan because here's the thing. Everyone hates backups, okay? Even me, okay? It's a pain in the ass thing to do. You know what the ultimate dream of every backup administrator is? To not be the backup administrator. Okay? It's how I got my job 18 years ago, right? I'm still amazed when I think back, 18 years ago. It was a $35 billion credit card company. Our entire IT data center, right, our entire storage was 200 gigabytes when I joined. And 3 years later, when I left, it had grown to like 400 gigabytes. A $35 billion company. I can't fathom that, right? And the reason I got my job was because a guy by the name of Ron Rodriguez couldn't stand having that job anymore, right? And of course, the first thing I did was I became not the guy who did the backups, but the guy who managed the guy who did the backups, right? That was and then I was the guy who managed the people that did the backups. And then I got out of consulting, I got out of that job and went into consulting to get out of backups, and you saw how well that worked. But here's the thing. Nobody wants to do this anyway. Give this job to a company that does this as their core competency. It's a really, really important task, so just give it to somebody. Put a piece of software on your computer at home, your computer's at work. This scales to a certain extent to include just about anybody, all right? So let's talk about this. So this works really, really well. Let me tell you about the most beautiful so like a lot of you, I'm guessing, I do tech support for my mom, right? She lives in Florida, and when she has weird stuff happen, she calls me. So several years ago, I got her on Mozy, okay, which is an outsourced, a cloud backup company. And this was pre-EMC, of course. And she, one day she called me, and she's like, hey, I had this problem with the Mozy, right? That's what she calls it, the Mozy. And I said, yeah, and what'd you do? And she goes, well, I called Mozy, and I had this, thing, and they worked it out, and we got this thing, and it was all good. It was like I was crying. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard my mother say, that she called, and she She had a problem, and she called someone other than me. I'm like, Mom, I will pay your $5 a month to do that. Okay, but here's the one problem that we do have is aggressive RTOs. This works great for my mom. She's got, 50 gigabytes of stuff in her house. This works. I am personally beyond the abilities for personal cloud backup products, right? So I'm a big movie watcher. I have somewhere in the neighborhood of 600 DVDs ripped and stored on storage. So I got about 6 terabytes of movies in my house, and none of these cloud providers want that, right? Besides the fact that it would take me about 4 years to do my first backup, right? It's not work. But what do we do as a business? So as a business, the RTO that's possible via the internet, it's got to be done with localized infrastructure. So if you're curious about cloud backup companies, cloud software from a backup perspective, do realize that some of them do provide services. Not all of it is virtual. If you have aggressive RTOs, they can do, just like we have cloud gateway boxes that act as a gateway to cloud and store locally stuff, the same thing that we have in the backup world. You can back up to a local server, which is just part of your service, and then that local server goes to larger companies. So let's talk about some of these products that I've interacted with. Backup. By the way, I wish I had all these really cool stats that Jason had. Those were some awesome, ridiculous stats. The turn this one computer on and we'll exhaust all the storage and, telescope exabyte of data. I wish I had all that stats. Instead, I have jungle disk. Okay. Like I said, my job is to try to make backups entertaining, educational, and fun, which is why I started out my presentation with Lady Gaga. Did you like my Lady Gaga video? Okay. No? I don't really care. Okay, so I do have a Beatles one. So these are so the first category of the backup software to cloud storage, these are the products that said we're going to, it's in the case of Zamanda, which is the commercial version of Amanda, right? Amanda is the granddaddy of the open source backup products, right? It stands for the Advanced Maryland Network Disk Archiver, which right off, I have a problem. It should be called Amandab, not Amanda, because it's not an archive product, it's a backup product. Be sure to come to my session later, 1:30, I think. Yeah, where we talk about, where's my co-presenter? Is he out there? There he is. We just found out we're co-presenters. Are you good? Yeah, we'll figure it out. Yeah. So 1:30, we're going to talk about archive and backup. These are two very distinct things. Okay, so it really should be called Zamandab. Somebody tell those guys. What's that? It's 3:30? Oh, we got gobs of time to work what we're going to say. Okay. All right. So Zamanda is a commercial version of Amanda, and they were actually the first product that I know of that supported backing up to the cloud. And then there was there's Jungle Disk. Now, Jungle Disk is a product specifically written for backing up to the cloud. It is a product that you can buy and a service that you can do to back up to S3, Amazon's storage. And then there's Commvault, right? So I have an asterisk there. The first two, Zamanda and Jungle Disk, those are open source solutions. And then there's Commvault. So they are the next one. I think there's probably some other of the commercial, the large, very expensive products that also back up to the cloud. But they're not on the slide. Okay, so here's this is where the real growth has happened, and I don't even have close to enough space on this slide to list. I listed some of the major ones, and by major ones I mean ones that you've heard of. Now, I have no idea what the market share of these companies are. I know Mozy probably has the most, just because they had, that was up until they upgraded their pricing. Anybody go through that? Anybody a Mozy customer when they upgraded their pricing? Anyone? Okay. So they basically, it was kind of like the, it's the unlimited ISP problem, right? So ISPs, the ones that we used to call, right, the ones that had modems, they had 10,000 customers and 400 modems, right? That's just the way it works. Same thing with a lot of this virtual infrastructure. You've got way more web servers on a given machine that you could ever possibly serve if they were all popular web servers, but that's how the business works. Same thing with Mozy. They had way too many customers that had taken advantage of the unlimited nature of Mozy, and they had several, well, not just several, they had thousands of customers that had multiple terabytes, some of them double digits of terabytes of backups in Mozy for $50 a year. And so EMC, after EMC took over Mozy, it was a relatively short time before they said, hey, we're going to, basically they changed their pricing overnight, and they said, you got 30 days to pay up or get out. And so for those of you that have large amounts of data, you definitely don't want to put it on Mozy. Well, unless you have large amounts of cash, go with your large amounts of data. Carbonite is certainly the one that has advertised the most. And then CrashPlan, I like CrashPlan a lot. They're not open source, but they're very open source friendly. They work on Windows, Linux, and Mac. We've used them. For those of you that are fall into that you like open source because it's cheap category, you'll really like CrashPlan. If you want to back up to yourself, it's totally free. You can put CrashPlan on any machine that you own, any Windows, Linux, or Mac, and it'll back up to that machine. You can have your home computer back up to your work computer. That doesn't cost you a dime, right? It only costs you if you want to back up to their servers. And then there's Dolly Drive for the Mac heads in the room. Dolly Drive is Time Machine to the cloud, which is pretty cool. They have you can back up to a local Time Machine hard drive, which for some reason Mac or Apple didn't make bootable. I don't know what Time Machine isn't bootable, but whatever Dolly Drive does to that backup, it's a Time Machine disk, but it's bootable, and then it also copies it up to the cloud. So this is what I think is really the future, okay? And that's file sync and sharing software, okay? We use Dropbox. I looked at a bunch of these other ones. This new one that I literally just found out about yesterday is Simplicity. That's the fourth one down. Voila is very interesting. So SugarSync and Dropbox are very similar, where SugarSync is the big difference there is that Dropbox, you have to put stuff in the Dropbox folder. SugarSync, you can sync any folder. Voila is closer to SugarSync in that regard. And Voila, you can actually rent them your storage. So basically, if you put a terabyte disk drive up online on a computer that's available all the time, they'll use that storage to put other people's stuff on, and then you get a terabyte of stuff in the cloud, which I think is pretty cool. I found the interface not to be that great. But the funniest thing about Voila, do we have any Tagalog-speaking folks in the room? Anyone? Nobody? Okay, my wife is Filipino. In Tagalog, Voila means lost, which I think is a really weird name to name a backup product, but whatever. Boxcryptor, so Simplicity and Boxcryptor, how I found them is that they seem to specialize on encrypting the data before it's sent, which is something neither Dropbox nor SugarSync seem to think is important. So the data is encrypted on your hard drive and then synced to the cloud, which is, would have been really nice, a few months ago when Dropbox had that little glitch where anybody could log in any Dropbox account with anyone's password. Yeah, that was great for about 4 hours. These are some other products there, iFolder and SparkleShare. For those of you that are open source advocates, climb onto one of these projects, right? iFolder and SparkleShare are both fledgling open source projects. I think iFolder is probably farther along than, I can't remember which one. One of them is farther along than the other. I haven't used either of them because I need more functionality than they currently provide. I love open source, but my God, right? There's like half a dozen other open source projects like this that tried to beat Dropbox. And they started and then, and then it wasn't happening. And so it didn't even fork. It just, somebody said, we're going to just do another one, but we'll get it right this time, and then another one and another one. So there's a whole bunch of these out there, but these two seem to have some traction. So what about cloud backups for larger companies? I talked about this already. The idea is they probably don't need them as much as smaller companies because they can afford to hire people like you and me and manage the infrastructure for them. But they have things like remote offices and mobile data, right? And this is where cloud backup does really, really well, and where perhaps they can do just that problem. Perhaps you're a company that has thousands of laptops that aren't being backed up. And if that is, and I'm not talking about thousands of laptops that are using Dropbox or the like, and they're not being backed up. I'm talking about thousands of laptops with no backups whatsoever, and that's a huge, huge risk for a lot of companies. So what about open source in the cloud? The nice thing about cloud services is that it's more about functionality than the product. APIs are the king, right? It's about NFS or CIFS or REST, iCalendar, SMTP. The result is I think that it's very easy to deploy an open type storage or open type computing product in the cloud, because in the end, I'm a cloud customer. I just care that I can get my email. Now, in the case of Exchange and Outlook, if I had something that was 100% or like 98% compatible and ran like Outlook and all of that, and there was something in the cloud, I'm sure there might even be, but I really wouldn't care. What I care about is that I get my email, I get my calendar, my contacts, and all of that nonsense. Now, I had a slide. Apparently, I opened up the wrong version of the presentation. I had a slide called What Keeps Me Awake at Night. Okay? And I actually got that. I was inspired to write that slide while I was sitting in Jason's presentation. And what keeps me awake at night is, I'm a backup guy, right? I'm concerned about, I am paranoid about losing data, right? I mean, look at me. I got my Mac, right? I'm pointing to my Mac's over there, and my book. I love my book sitting next to. How you doing there, Theron? Right. And I have a time machine backup of it. I have a Dropbox, which means my data is synchronized to like half a dozen other people as well as up in the cloud. And then I also use CrashPlan to back up my machine, right? I'm a paranoid, SOB. Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean nobody's out to get you, right? So my point is that this is what I think about. So when I think about putting data in the cloud, the first question I start to ask is, where's my backup, right? So I'm a huge fan of Salesforce, right? It is so much better than what I used 8 years ago, and all the things. I love the fact that I have a Salesforce person using Salesforce, and when they close a Salesforce deal, I have 2 other cloud products that talk to Salesforce, and when he closes that opportunity, it creates a project in a product called @task. So now we automatically have a project for some webinar or seminar that someone has asked us to do for them. And it also automatically creates, there's a thing called Q Commission that talks from Salesforce to QuickBooks, and it automatically calculates and creates the commission for that sale for that sales rep. I love that, right? Now, at the same time, how do I back up my Salesforce stuff? I don't know, right? I'm scared to death. My company's like run on this database that is unbackupable. There's a word for you, unbackupable, right? There's some exports that you can do of certain stuff in Salesforce, but it's not really a backup of Salesforce. If the server that my stuff is on disappeared tomorrow and I found out in the paper, right? Because, by the way, that's how I found out about the Dropbox thing, was I read it in the paper. I love that. I'm a commercial customer of Dropbox, and I find out that my account was, potentially compromised. I read it in the paper like everyone else. So I wake up one morning and I find out that Salesforce guys didn't know how to do backups, and all their servers went Tango Uniform, and all this, well, it's only the customers that were in the servers in Wichita, but that's where my stuff is. I don't know. I'm just making stuff up. I'm not saying Salesforce doesn't know what they're doing. Okay, the cameras, 3 of them, holy crap, 3 cameras, that's what you needed? Right, but I wake up one morning and my Salesforce data is gone. I have no idea what I would do the next day, right, to conduct my business. So I'm worried about that. I'm worried that there's no API to back up Salesforce. There's no incremental backup way to deal with that. And there's other products like, it's one thing to sync my data to the cloud. Like in Dropbox, I have a local copy, and then I have a synced copy in the cloud. That's one thing. Then it's a whole other thing to put my data on S3, my primary data on S3 or any other public cloud storage provider. How do I back that data up, right? That's why I'm definitely a fan of these products that are acting as gateways, right, where I can have a local copy, and then the cloud for me becomes the backup, the other copy. There are also products that will allow you to back up or copy your data to 2 different cloud providers. Now, your bill just doubled, right, but at least I feel better, okay? And then the other thing that keeps me awake at night is this idea of data that's too big to back up. So Jason just freaking my ass out, okay? The stuff that he talked about, we turn on these computers and we will exhaust the enterprise storage market, and it was like 3 days or some crap like that. Here's the thing, that for those of you that don't live in the backup world, machine-generated data, right, which in my world is anything, and actually Theron and I had a discussion as to whether or not that camera there was generating, is that human-generated data or machine-generated data? Machine-generated data, to me, is any machine, which includes that camera, that's creating data based on a machine observing usually a natural event or maybe creating some calculations, okay? Here's the thing. Machine-generated data, non-dedupable, period. Because every time that camera takes a photo, every time you have a computer that calculates something, it's brand new data. Every freaking time. So this wonderful thing that has just come as a savior to the dedupe, this dedupe product that has come as a savior to the backup world, it ain't going to help with big data. It just isn't going to help. Because that stuff's brand new every day, and apparently we're going to have some telescope that's going to generate an exabyte of data a day, and I'm sure there'll be 1,400 other products like that. That stuff freaks me out, right? The other stuff that freaks me out is when people say things, well, it'll just be too big to back up. And I just, I get all, right, fidgety. It freaks me out. Or when I hear products that are saying, well, big data is too big to back up, and so our product is designed not to be backed up, right? It's just built in it. A lot of these object storage products, right? And I don't mean any disrespect to these companies that do that. I'm just saying, what keeps me awake at night? Products that say, if you put your stuff on us, you don't need to back it up. Okay. I hope you're right. Right? Now, when people say backup, right, when you say big data is too big to back up, just real quick, what they mean is it's too big to do traditional full and incremental backup from, okay? If you've got, I don't know, ridiculous, I went to there was a little big data mini conference at the EMC World, and they had all these, what's their company, their product? I don't know, that Isilon? Is that Isilon? Is that theirs? Okay, you guys are looking at me like crickets. Help me out here. And they had all these customers that had ridiculous amounts of data, and like 90% of those customers raised their hand when they said they had no idea how they were going to back this stuff up. That crap freaks me out, right? So they've got all this terabytes, exabytes, petabytes of data. Remember, petabytes are fine, petaphiles are bad. Okay. That's my finishing comment. All right. So that's what keeps me awake at night. Anybody, I have like, I don't know, look at that, 7 minutes for questions. No questions about my last comment, by the way. Yes, sir.
You mentioned about the camera taking pictures, and
Yeah.
See, there's the technologies that's starting to happen, pattern recognition, and that itself would find, like you remember MPEG 3 and MPEG
Yep.
4, and so whatever
Yes.
the incremental changes,
Right.
that's the one that needs to be backed up, just like you have incremental backups.
Yeah, agreed.
So that's a savior that's going to happen over time.
Yeah, I think it will. I mean, there are some, so like, what's the product that Dell bought? Ocarina, right? So Ocarina does, they're able to do some kind of dedupe kind of stuff when comparing photo to photo, file to file, and compress those files as much as possible. What I mean when I say dedupe doesn't work on photos or machine-generated data, I mean traditional dedupe that we're currently using in the market today is completely worthless when it comes to deduping machine-generated data. Because dedupe works by looking for patterns, right? Block patterns between different files and backups, and there aren't any when we talk about photos and videos and who else?
I'm interested in the comment that you made. I like what you said about how you showed the evolution of the cloud and how it just was natural for you to do that. And then also you said it seemed like it's more flexibility than necessarily cost, because I'm kind of in agreement with you. So now I guess what my point would be is that when it starts coming to this big scaling and stuff like that, do you see then that that traditional IT just will kind of collapse and we're going to have a few cloud services? You know, ultimately at the end of time, there's going to be maybe just a few vendors that really provide this service?
Yeah, I talk, most of my audiences are IT geeks, right? I mean, these are guys in companies doing this stuff, and I tell them, I says, I realize you may be interpreting this, me to say, my sort of love of the cloud to suggest maybe all of you would be out of a job tomorrow. And it's like, well, you just end up working for a cloud provider. Will it do away with IT as we know it? I don't think so. But I do think for certain size companies and certain types of industries, there's just some things that are just so, there's just certain, what I do like about it, like I said, is that it's about flexibility. So if tomorrow I decide to go with Salesforce's competitor, whatever that is, I know they have some, okay, then I can just move, right? And I didn't spend, now I might want to wait until my Salesforce contract is up or something like that, but I didn't spend $150,000 on a server that now I'm stuck with. Yeah, but I don't know. I don't know what's, I think we'll still have IT as we know it. It's just, I think more and more stuff will be done in the cloud. Yes?
Sure, I had another one. When you're network now, is that important? How are you seeing for small businesses? Are they getting those redundant network connections? Are they actually asking the proper questions to make sure there's not two pipes off the same ring, things like that? Is there any progress being made there?
It depends on if we're talking about what I call TSBs or SMBs, right? TSBs are truly small businesses, right? Like I'm a TSB, okay? TSBs aren't asking those questions at all, right? It's only when we get to the true SMB category where we start to have, 100, 150, 250, maybe 1,000 employees, then we start asking those questions. For me, the way we work, and the way I think a lot of small companies, if their connection went down, if the provider's connection went down, we'd be screwed. But we're kind of choosing sort of well-known products rather than, it's like, and once you've chosen one product like Salesforce, then your next question for the next company is, do you work with Salesforce? And that's how you end up picking a product, not so much their network connectivity. Hustle, man.
So you mentioned about moving all of your services and IT and stuff to cloud providers. What are your thoughts on the ability of getting data back out? Like, it's your data.
Yeah, that was on my list of scary, right? So most of the services that we've dealt with, I have a copy of the data, right? And like in the case of Dropbox, in the case of Exchange, right, the hosted stuff, I have everything in my, I keep pointing to this laptop like it's mine. I have a copy, like a localized copy of everything in Exchange in my Outlook, and if I needed to switch Exchange servers, I could, and just move that data over there. But then there are products like Salesforce where I have very limited ability, and I just have to deal with what they provide me, and I'm not very happy about that. But what we don't have is we don't have any products where we have real data. Like for me, it's a PowerPoint presentation, only stored in a cloud provider, and I can't get it out.
What do you see happening in the area of standards? And what I'm thinking about are standards that would require something like getting data out of a cloud in order to meet a requirement, something like the ITEL or payment card industry or some of those groups that might mandate it either at a trade association level or even a federal level.
Yeah, I think it's a great thing. I just don't see it happening very much yet, right? So what's going to happen is we're going to have the big outage, right? We're going to have, this thing that we had with Amazon recently, the big outage that was there. What's that? The third one. I didn't know about the other two. Okay. It's just going to have to happen in some big enough company with big enough pockets to make it happen. It's just that's what's going to have to happen. But for now, my primary use of the cloud is data that I synchronize to the cloud rather than store only in the cloud. So if an outage happens, I have reduced functionality, not my business isn't down. And what I do throw out, just one final comment on if it's just outages we're talking about. When we talk, a lot of people slam the cloud because of the outages that have hit. and they say that as if traditional IT doesn't have outages, right? That's all I'll say about that.
Okay, thank you,
All right,
Curtis.
thanks a lot, guys.
So this concludes our keynotes for this morning.